We'll first start with Dr. Laura Sudulich. She will present a paper on Northern Irish citizen preferences for border arrangements after Brexit, evidence from a conjoint survey experiment. Dr. Sudulich is a senior lecturer in politics at the School of Politics and International Relations at the University of Kent. She's also affiliated to the Centre d'études de la vie politique, CEVIPOL, Université Libre de Bruxelles. During the academic year 2012-2013, she was a Max Weber Fellow at the European University Institute and holds a PhD in political science from Trinity College, Dublin. She has worked at the University of Amsterdam as a lecturer and postdoctoral fellow, where she contributed to the Support and Opposition to Migration project known as SOM, funded by the European Commission. She has taught a number of courses on new technologies and electoral competition, media and politics, electoral campaigns, research methods, and politicization of immigration. Dr. Sudulich, your floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to present a paper that is co-authored with Neo, Ed, and Fergal, who is not here with us. So it's a product of the University of Kent's team. And what I'm going to do is fundamentally two things. I'll describe a little bit the broader project, the broader framework of the project we are working at, and then I will present findings from this first sort of pilot survey experiment that we ran in Northern Ireland last year. So let me start with describing the idea behind this grant that we hold from the United States Institute of Peace. Fundamentally, we are concerned with the fact that in divided societies, there's a lot of focus on finding solutions and designing arrangements for transitioning to more stable setup. And in such a process, we often find elites to be the ones that receive not only the largest chunk of attention, but the ones we as observers end up being concerning with, right? So we always think of negotiating processes as the product of community leaders, and we sort of leave aside those who have to live with the consequences of whatever community leaders negotiate. So our focus here is on public opinion, is on those who have to live with the consequences of peace arrangements. The assumption here is that if we can account for citizen preferences before arrangements are reached, then we are set for a good start for arrangements to be durable and to be guaranteed legitimacy. So if there is popular legitimacy attached to peace agreements, then we have a better chance of stable and durable peace processes. And this is really what drove us to write this grant application and study two contexts that are quite different. So we focus on Cyprus and Northern Ireland. And they're quite different because where in Cyprus there is no solution on the table, Northern Ireland has been living with a peace solution for the past 20 years. The fundamental difference is that in Northern Ireland, peace is the status quo, and in Cyprus, we haven't reached that point yet. So that's why we thought these two contexts were particularly interesting to us. And Northern Ireland is particularly interesting right now because it's subject to the Brexit shock. So there'll be a number of things to be negotiated and re-established in the aftermath of Brexit. We believe that it's important to map public opinion in advance of any negotiating process. Otherwise, we end up with situations like the rejected agreement in Cyprus in 2004, or what happened in Colombia with the Colombian referendum in 2016. So we think if there's more transparency, on what, and awareness on what people would support that should bring enhanced information to the peace negotiating tables and possibly set up things for a better start and an even better ending. So we believe that this matters because in conflict society or post-conflict society, we often observe these two or more communities being sort of trapped in this narrative of us and them, which is very often based on misconceptions. And that applies to people, but also to elites. We think we know what the other community wants, what the other community is after, but there is no real transparency on what the other community or members of the other communities really prefer. And we believe that this sort of awareness is also helpful for negotiators, which very often have set their own agenda and have sort of compartmentalized knowledge. So they've boxed in preferences, and through the application of this methodology, we can offer a richer and more open sense of what really are the preferences within each community. The third reason why we believe this is important, this is interesting, is because we can survey and we can apply, we can extract this knowledge from groups that very often tend to be marginalized. And in the case of our Cyprus study, we'll be studying those living in the island as well as the two diasporas. So we think that bringing to the table more points of views of relevant actors, even if minorities, is generally gonna produce better negotiating processes. And again, what negotiators would or could do with that is not so much up to us, but more information is better than less. Now, how it matters? Well, because it does reduce these information asymmetries that exist in divided societies, and very often information asymmetries that exist between citizens and elites. So the short end of our motivation is that we believe having more knowledge and better knowledge would promote legitimized solutions. And that's particularly important when peace processes are due to be ratified by referendums or by electoral processes. And that talks quite a bit to the current situation in the Brexit negotiations as much as in the negotiation in Cyprus and in Northern Ireland. So now I want to talk about our study of Northern Ireland. And while I know that this is not particularly impressive here, it's a picture of a border, and I'm sure it's something you're familiar with. When I show this in other places, people are not used to seeing borders and find it particularly scary. I'm sure here it doesn't sort the same reaction, but this is actually is not even a real border. This was a protest that took place a couple of months ago on the border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, where protesters reenacted what used to be the border in place 20 years ago. And in order to avoid a situation under which the border is re-established, we would have to go beyond the idea of a no-deal scenario in the Brexit negotiations. So Brexit, when it comes to Brexit, it's very hard to summarize what is going on. So I found a picture that sort of tells what's going on right now in the Brexit negotiations. We are sort of trapped, and a lot of people feel that we need help. Now I'm gonna state a few facts about Brexit and its consequences for Northern Ireland. This slide used to be the UK will leave the European Union on March 29. Now we have gone past March 29th and we are still here. Now, we know that Northern Irish citizens strongly oppose the idea of Brexit. So 56% of citizens in Northern Ireland voted to remain. So it's sort of imposed over the will of the majority of citizens. And there are a number of oddities that have been taking place in the politics of Northern Ireland in these past 2 years. The first of them being the power sharing governments being out of business for such an extended period of time. And the second one is the Democratic Unionist Party being pivotal to the survival of the UK government. And I'm sure you're all familiar with what is happening these days. Now, one of the reasons why citizens of Northern Ireland would prefer to remain in the European Union has to do possibly with the guarantees for peace, but there are strong economic reasons why Northern Ireland prefers remaining in the European Union, and most of all the fact that the region strongly depends on subsidies for agriculture. So I'm just gonna move on to our study, and if you have questions on the context, I'm happy to answer them in the Q&A. So the issue of the border has often been treated as a dichotomy, border, no border. But the border really encompasses a number of dimensions that have to do with security, with the economy, and with the symbolism. And we think that it's important to sort of break down all these elements, and we do so by means of conjoint experiments. And I'll tell you a couple of words about how we ran these experiments last year. So we presented respondents with two packages that contain a number of dimensions that have to do with the economy, with identity and security concerns. And we broke this complexity down in 5 dimensions, which we can define as 5 problems that need solution. And for each of these problems, we attributed values, which, again, we can look at as solutions to that particular problem. So just to give an example, one of the biggest problem has to do with the location of the border. Where is this border going to be located? Is it going to be in the island of Ireland between the north and the south, or in the Irish Sea between the east and the west? So we call north-south and east-west solution for the border location. Then there are arrangements to be made for border crossing checks. Are these checks going to be physical? Are they going to be digital? Is there even the possibility of no checks whatsoever? And we allowed for all these potential solutions. On top of this, we have, and I won't describe all the options, we have arrangements to be made for the maintenance, control of the border, and we allowed for the fact that citizens of Northern Ireland that were against leaving the European Union should be or could be compensated with an increase in public spending. And we allowed for different percentages of increase or no increase whatsoever. So I'm going to skip quickly to our findings here that enable us to map the preferences of the two communities vis-a-vis each other. And here, a simple way of looking at this map is when you see the dot, which is the point estimate of the two communities, when you see the blue and the black dot close to each other, means that the two communities are in alignment. So they would, in principle, agree to these solutions. And as you can see, they would both prefer to be compensated. They would both prefer for maintenance and border checks to be performed by the two states together. And they would both prefer mild forms of checks. So checks that are not time-consuming and economically expensive. Now, where we see this agreement is on the location of the border, which is carrying all these symbolic elements. Clearly, the Unionists would prefer a land border, and the Nationalists would prefer a border in the Irish Sea. Now, the type of analysis that we conducted and we are due to replicate in Cyprus and in a future study of Northern Ireland enable us to simulate various potential agreements and estimate the overall support and the bi-community support for each and every one of those simulated agreements. And I just want to talk about the first one, which is the no-deal scenario. If everything goes wrong, that's what would happen next Friday. So there would be a border between the north and the south of the island of Ireland. There'd be physical checks. There'd be separated teams performing the checks. Maintenance should be up to the UK, and there'd be no compensation due to citizens of Northern Ireland. Now, what I think is interesting here is that not only we see that overall this scenario would receive just about 40% of popular support, and while we sort of anticipated that in the nationalist community this scenario would be particularly unpopular, what is interesting is that even within the unionist community, it will reach a bare 50% of support. So 1 out of 2 unionists wouldn't be happy with a no-deal scenario, which is something you wouldn't necessarily gather by reading the paper and getting the point of view of leaders of the DUP. Now, there are a number of other potential scenarios that we could simulate, and the last one is the one that would secure reaching 50% plus across both communities. Now, the takeaway message is very simple. There's quite a lot of consensus, quite more than we would think, and no deal is unpopular across the board. So we're going to replicate this in Northern Ireland and in Cyprus. And I think my time is up. Thank you.